Is your home in order? Is your home in order? Hold that for a minute, because if you notice in our gospel story today, a big piece of what Jesus' teaching happens in a home. And there's some scholarship that suggests that when we are here in the Bible that something happens in a home, that maybe Jesus is up to our internal home as well. And the teaching that is happening is supposed to be about some sort of teaching for us inside. So I ask you this question, and hold on to it for a little bit. Is your home in order? But before we get to the home, Jesus and his disciples are traveling along the way, and I love this, that Jesus, they're walking along, and he starts talking about this new humanity that is going to be put in place, and it's all about their hero being handed over to those who hate him, and he's going to die and then rise again. And you got to remember, this is the first time people are hearing this, so it's no surprise to me that Mark says, and so the disciples say nothing. Because can you imagine? You're walking along and all of a sudden he starts talking in this kind of talk. It would be almost, okay, great for you. We're going to keep talking about who's the greatest, because that's what we thought we were about here, overturning everything. And I wonder about their conversations, how they're disputing about this, who's the greatest. Well, he called me first. Well, I always sit by him at dinner. Well, I have more money, I have more children, that means my name will go, whatever. What makes them the greatest? But I love that that's what they're talking about, and Jesus is now over here doing this theology that it's are they even connected at all? So it's no surprise then that it's only until they get into the house, into a contained place where they can really talk, that they begin to hear what he has to say. And I love the fact, and I'm so grateful for the fact that he doesn't shame them when he says to them, so what were you guys talking about? When I was trying to tell you what was going to happen and you were clueless and chatting about something else, what was it? And they tell him, first they're quiet, right? They're like, oh, I don't know. Then they end up telling, and he doesn't laugh at them. He just says, oh, this is what you're concerned about. Let's get your house in order about how we understand what it means to be great. And for Jesus, being great is not about external things. It's not about what you have on the outside, like what you own or what you do or how people have acknowledged you or what titles you've been given. For many of us in this room, you would say, Heath, I know that already. And for many of us in this room, some of the same people would say, but do you live in the world I live in? I mean, that is how the world says that we are great. And not even great, but how we fit in, how we make sense, how we have a name, how we can show up at all. I mean, if you're in middle school or high school right now, you must be laughing at me and thinking, do you live my life? Don't you know that who your sports team is and how they perform is not just about them, but a reflection if you actually fit in at school? Am I right about this a little bit? Right? So it's true for adults too. You go to work, you raise your children, and without realizing it, all of a sudden you're sucked into, this is right. Who I am as a complete person, forget just greatness, forget about just fitting in at all, has to do with who I know, what I wear, or what I say, or who I talk to, or how I'm acknowledged. I have to believe in some way it was true for the very first followers of Christ. And he comes in and he says, oh, so you're concerned about this? Well, let me tell you how it goes. It doesn't go that way. Actually, the way that greatness happens, if you really want it forever and for always, it happens when you begin to align yourself and reorder your home into this energy of love that comes from God. And it's no wonder that they're still sitting there saying nothing, right? Because what does that mean? Reordering yourselves, reordering your home so that you're in this love flow connection with God. And I love that then he shows them how you do this. First of all, you reach out to the least among us. Now, for some of us in this room, we're like, oh, right, I remember. That's right. We reach out to those in need. And if you've done that, if you've worked in a soup kitchen, if you've gone out with Sandy to Kamali, if you have gone on a mission trip, or you've done anything with your family or your school where you've reached out to somebody in need, even if you've befriended the least likely person, right? Reach out to someone in need, you know that it's true. That there is something that happens when you do that you do kind of tap into a different perspective and a different part of love, a different part of what it means to be a human being. But if we're not careful, that can quickly turn into, I really want to know what it's like to be the greatest. I really want to feel like I fit in. Okay, I'm going to go reach out to the person in need, and I'm helping the needy, and then pretty soon, once I finish helping them, then I'm going to get to go and be great, right? If we're not careful, it can turn into that. If we're not careful, when we hear reach out to the least, it can sound like, oh, then if I really have something to offer, I better play small because I don't want to show up big and, I'm supposed to be reaching out to the least, so I'll just keep all the gifts God have given me quiet. But that's not what he's saying either, because both of those don't do anything to heal the separateness that's happening with people, right? It still keeps this hierarchy of somebody's greater and better and somebody is in need. Yes, go out and reach out to those in need. And in just a little while, our junior high children are going to go and make sack lunches for people in need. And yeah, they're going to do that because these people need something to eat. And they're going to do that not because they're better, but because they know what it's like to be hungry. They're a human being reaching out to a human being. So then Jesus says, okay, if you're not getting what I'm saying, to be great means to reach out to the least, then let me show you how to do it. So it's not about your ego and it's not about being better, but it's about being connected to this love flow of God that brings all of creation back in order. Let's get your house in order, and here's how it goes. So he goes over and picks up a child. Now, for many of us here, that sounds like a beautiful, oh, that's wonderful. He's picking up the children, right? But you got to remember, that's not what it was like for him, for people in his time. Children were not as valued as they are in our society today, and they were not, it's certainly how they are at Holy Comforter. Children were property. He's picking up nothing. He's picking up somebody who cannot give him anything back. He's reaching out to somebody that can't pay it forward, pay it back. It's nothing. Not only is he reaching out to this, but he's welcoming. He's welcoming the child. So he's saying to his disciples, it's not just about acknowledging someone that's less, but it's about you're welcoming that least. And you know how you do it? You don't do it by naming all the things that are great about you. Jesus doesn't say, remember, I'm the healer, teacher, miracle worker. Some of you call me Messiah. And all of that is who I am that's picking up this child. No. Mark's gospel would always want us to remember Jesus identifies with his humanity. And he strips away in this moment any titles, anything he's done, and it's that core center, that bare, raw humanness of him that welcomes nothing less than the humanness of the child. And when they are welcomed, and that child is now seen, and then the Father is seen, and love begins to flow. And it's a miracle. It's a mysterious transformation. The lesson becomes for us, if you want to be great, then you reorder your house, where the very first thing and the most valuable, beautiful part of what you know is your humanity. In that little, what we would say is the least, that is when you will find, when you reach out to someone else, the love of God and the greatness that we seek. And that greatness, that love, is what brings about healing and cleansing and reconciliation and joy and hope. I read an example of what I'm trying to explain earlier this week. Some of you might have heard of Carl Rogers, who was a therapist in the late 50s and 60s, and his big perspective and sort of contribution to mental health was client-based or patient-based therapy, where he believed that the person sitting in front of him, and now these are my words, but was naturally creative, resourceful, and whole. And that his job as the therapist was to help that person tap into that. But he didn't, so he explained, he has a conference, he's meeting with a group of other would-be therapists and students, and he confesses to them how he gets ready to meet with a patient. And he doesn't say, I turn to the wall of my office and look over all my degrees. As valuable, as important as those are, okay? He doesn't start there. He doesn't go through a filing cabinet full of letters from folks who've said, because of my work with you, my life is better. He doesn't look at any awards he's been given. Nothing outside. What he does, and I'm going to read it to you so I get it right. He says one thing to himself. Before every session, I take a moment to remember my humanity. There is no experience that this person has that I cannot share with him or with her. No fear I cannot understand. No suffering that I cannot care about. Because I too am human. I too am vulnerable. And because of this, I am enough. The people that were at that conference said what happened after he told them that. He asked a volunteer to come up and to serve as the role of the patient or the client. And he began to work with this doctor who was serving as the patient. And through their conversation, the doctor began to take off one mask after another, right, in their work. And pretty soon, what was left was nothing less than that human talking to another simple human. And the beauty of one human being to another, stripped down to the very least of who they were the force and the source of how the greatest began to be alive. And that's what we're called to do. That's what we already do. Being aware of it, being conscious of it, makes it all the better. We gather here in this home to reorder this home so we can empty all of who we are and receive nothing less than who we are. And we get reordered, and soon we shine as beautiful and as vulnerable and as powerful and as great as we desire. Amen.